Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Psychedelic Scene podcast. My name is Jill Sitnick. I'm your host. Think of me as your psychedelic big sister, helping you understand all this stuff that's coming out about psychedelics recently. And today's episode stars Alex Deetaring. And Alex and I are very similar in that we are creating content for folks that we wish had been around when we were going through our own therapy. One of the taglines of my YouTube channel is, "This is the content I wish had been around when I was going through my therapy." And Alex is creating a historical record of folks who have gone through this therapy and are kind of explaining the good, bad, and the ugly, basically their experiences. It's over on his Substack. But I think it was a really interesting journey of how he got there, why he's doing what he's doing, how he's doing what he's doing. And ultimately, if any of you out there are interested in sharing your experience, you get to kind of interview Alex by listening to this podcast and seeing if you're interested in reaching out. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Psychedelic Scene podcast. I'm really excited today because we're going to find out what happens when you have two podcasters on one podcast at the same time. Today we have Alex Detmering. Alex, how are you? Welcome.
I'm great, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, folks, let me introduce you to Alex before you're like, oh my gosh, podcast host overload here. All right. Alex is the executive director of the Parable Foundation. The foundation is a nonprofit dedicated to telling the whole story on psychedelic therapy, and its mission came directly out of Alex's personal experience. Psychedelics ignited a multi-year crisis in Alex's life. We're going to find out about that. And psychedelic therapy helped him navigate that crisis, and the experience changed him forever. It also instilled a passion to help people in similar positions find their way. And this is what the foundation does by sharing the truth about what psychedelic therapy really is like through honest accounts of people who've done it. And is it not appropriate that we are having this conversation as we've both gone through the therapy? Welcome, Alex.
Right on. Thank you so much for having me, Jill. It's great.
Yeah.
I guess the first question for me to answer is, what's my story, right?
Yeah. Introduce yourself to our audience. What's your origin story? How the heck do you find yourself talking on the Psychedelic Scene podcast?
I got into psychedelics because I left Christianity. So I was a missionary in China for some years. I had what I would call my first psychedelic experience. I took a big drag of what seems to have been marijuana, but probably something more than that. And I'll be damned if it didn't give me one of the wildest experiences still to this day. So one of the things that happened during that experience was that the drug pulled up two objects and it put them right in space, and both of them were very uncomfortable for me to look at. And I knew what I didn't know what they meant, but I knew what they felt like. And then after that, I promptly forgot about one of them. One of them was the concept of God, and it was like floating in the air, and it just was so painful. And the feeling that I got from looking at it was just doubt. And the other one was something that I do not share. It wasn't long after that experience that I did end up losing my faith in God. And that was one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. For me, it was, it happened to me. And I spontaneously burst into tears, and it was awful. It really was awful. So I was in this coffee shop in China, and I was like, oh crap, I don't believe in God. The concept of God like evaporated out of my brain, and I knew it was like I had gone past the threshold, that there was no coming back. But the next most important in terms of why I created the Parable Foundation was I decided I want to do something really significant. And what happened was I got my life turned upside down. Because I took more mushrooms than I'd ever taken before. It was really gentle. But what it moved into was this vast sky. And I saw a stream that was like flowing from ages back into the end of time. And the stream was music. And what I felt during that experience was that what came to me was that music is the language of what can't be spoken, and that people throughout time use music to communicate the things that cannot be spoken, and that's why it's so goddamn powerful. And then it moved to the pain that someone very close to me had, and I felt that, and I cried harder than I've ever cried in my entire life before. And then what I can only describe as a back door in my mind opened, and the second image that had come up during the first time I ever smoked weed popped right out. I said in my own head, "Oh, there you are." I tried to forget this after the experience, but this time it did not stick. All I can tell you is that image, I completely forgot that I had ever seen that image before in the intervening time. I couldn't forget it for the rest of my life so far. So I tried to avoid it, and I couldn't. That just squeezed my perspective on life down to the size of about a pinhole. It was hell. I spent some years in said hell because I just didn't want to look at the thing. And so I was trying to avoid the thing, and the thing was getting louder and louder and taking up more and more of my mind space. Could barely sleep. I would wake up and have that split second of peace, and then all of a sudden the sledgehammer of the fear and the radioactive energy and body load that comes with that kind of level of fear hit me. I eventually kind of broke, which was one of the worst days of my life, because I was basically like, to put it generically, the image was something that was ambiguous but painful. And my mind was putting ideas about what that meant about who I was, what I believed on top of it. And me breaking was saying that my fears about what it could be true were what were true about me. While that was one of the worst days of my life, it was also the start of me being able to like deal with this, because instead of it just being like in the background of my mind, I had to deal with it because it was fucking shit up. It had escaped jail and was just roaming the streets. That started me down the process of actually trying to figure shit out. So there was no concept that was going to fix this. The only thing that could fix this was the truth. And so I started reading books. I started meditating quite a bit. Therapy was involved before I even broke and after. What ended up happening was I came to the belief that since psychedelics opened up this door in my mind, they would be the thing that could probably be the only thing that would be powerful enough for me really to address or walk through this, right? So I started doing psychedelic therapy. I decided on MDMA because what I was dealing with was fear. And one of the biggest reasons was I was dealing with this fear, and MDMA is known as the one that you use to conquer fear, or can teach you about handling fear. So that started another multi-year process, doing about every 4 months, a big psychedelic session. Started with a therapist, went on to doing trusted friends. In the intervening months, more and more seriously, trying to do the things that I thought I was coming to understand during my therapy sessions. They did change my life. Or they're like the truth of what I experienced has only become like more clear to me, more time removed, right? I can point to these things as this is a day that was an inflection point. So that changed my life. And then the other thing that really changed my life was just how maniacally I had to work to be able to, really what you're doing is you're internalizing. You internalize the stuff that I felt like I understood from my experiences. It's like, oh, okay, instead of psychologically avoiding pain, look into pain again and again and again and again and again and again. And literally, it's a meditative process. That's one of the key things that I learned, but it's a meditative process that I had to apply basically moment by moment for years, to be able to move from life ruled by toxic fear, OCD, to the best I've ever felt and the best life I've ever had and the strongest I've ever been. But the amount of work that it took me to do that is mind boggling for me, right? Like people have done many things, but for me personally, I had never experienced that amount of like just hard work. I spent so much time focused on my body and what was going on in my body that it gave me this wild awareness of like where I felt different things, what that means. If I felt something here and it correlates with this, and it was another level of understanding my body as a mechanism, as like a spiritual, biological thing, and so valuable. So coming out of this, I've always loved writing. I've always loved storytelling. And I wanted to create a podcast for a really long time, years. And the vision for the podcast, the Parable Foundation, is rooted in exactly my experience, and the experience I feel like many other people have as well of the mental health journey as a whole, but definitely psychedelic therapy, that the confusing many dead ends, frustration, roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, that part of it. Also, the thing that was most difficult for me wasn't something that had been done to me. It was something about me that I was struggling with, whether or not was true or I could move through or accept the fear of. It was about me. It was my shadow. That was the thing that was the primary cause of the crisis. And it was the MDMA and its ability to help me sit and see those things inside me until they showed me their true nature. And also listening to stories of other people, those confessions of the lives of other people, these incredibly vulnerable aspects of like them trying to figure out what's true about them. Like that made such a big difference to me. So these things all kind of come together with the Parable Foundation and the things the Parable Foundation does, the Secret Wilderness podcast. It's an anonymous podcast where we try to go as deep as anyone will allow into people's experiences, to talk about all of the confusion and the messiness, to not try to have any agenda on is, this good or bad, or is your experience good or bad, or what are your outcomes, and to enable people to go into detail about their own shadow, like their own darkness, not like metaphors, like what did you see? What did you feel? What did you do? What did you think you did? What happened? Because it's in those specifics about yourself that you find so much personal liberation. It's also in the experience of listening to people say things that are like the things that you feel like you were only true about you, that you can find a personal opening. When someone describes in detail the experience of running into something that for you has always been a wall, and then they describe the next step, that thing that they just ran into, which was always a wall, now becomes a door. There's an opportunity to open it now that you may have never seen before. And that is so much of what I want to do with this foundation, what I want to do with the work, with my life, is build opportunities for people to see that the walls aren't walls, that there's always a way through. And that's the mission.
So many similarities between our experiences. If the audience is sitting here saying, why didn't he tell us the particular issue? What I think is way more important than any sort of trip report is the experience of the confusion of a journey, the unraveling, the unearthing, the challenge of, I'm going to use the word discovery, but it certainly does not feel in the positive way of discovery. I wonder if there's a word that has kind of a negative connotation with discovery, because a lot of the integration when you're going through that unearthing is very unpleasant. It's unpleasant somatically. It's unpleasant with the memories. It's unpleasant not only in terms of the content, but also in how it is jumbled. I wrote my book, I do my YouTube channel, exactly what you were talking about. When I was going through my therapy, I could not find, other than Reddit, anything out there talking about it. And even the stuff
Yep.
I found on Reddit was way too many trip reports. And trip reports can help, but they didn't particularly help me. I wanted to know the whole process. I wanted to understand how people were working with this stuff, and that information really wasn't out there. So I totally understand. One of my taglines in my YouTube channel is like, I'm creating the channel I wish I'd been around when I was going through this therapy. So
Yep.
if folks are kind of listening here, really take away from what Alex said in terms of the messiness of the whole process and the challenge of it. It can be incredibly disruptive. And so I really appreciate your vulnerability and the time you spent explaining all of that, because anybody listening who is thinking about psychedelic assisted psychotherapy and is listening to any of the little blurbs on some of the major news outlets or some of the research out there thinking, oh, it's just, it's a one-day thing.
There's so many awesome stories on Reddit that are just in this wild world where it doesn't fit any kind of like narrative in a lot of ways. Like those were big inspirations for me personally. I wanted to make the podcast to capture the wild and woolly nature of mental health journeys and psychedelic therapy. I have known many people for years that have done this stuff. And the amount of times they get blindsided by things as they go through this process, many times they'll have a journey where a murderous thought comes from inside of them. And so the question is, am I evil? Homicidal tendencies are just one example of all the kinds of things that cannot be shared. Because when you talk about that in the way that needs to be, the vulnerability that needs to be talked about, right? You are treading in ground where you actually don't know what it is, right? You don't. And in fact,
and the mind works in metaphors.
To actually process that thing, you have to be willing to not know, because when you don't know, you open yourself up to see. And when I'm putting ideas onto reality or my experience, this is what this is, that is the interpretation. But when I say I don't know, then it allows me to discover what it actually is, vulnerability. So like when people in the process of self-discovery, people in the process of the mental health journey, that's the position that has to be taken with all of these kinds of like scary as hell things that they're experiencing. Like, what does this mean about me? Like, what is this idea? What is this feeling? What is this thought? Is this who I am essentially? Is this really part of who I am?
Yes. Yes. The deeper I went into early, so the PTSD treatment got me no longer suicidal. I still had 19 years of neglect and abuse to deal with. Some of the worst journeys, ridiculously healing, but worst journeys were where my whole body felt a depth of sadness and despair and isolation and abandonment. And I had to sit there through 5 to 6 hours of a psilocybin journey just saying, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling this way? What's going on? Didn't show up until, 5 hours and 45 minutes. And it's the discomfort and it's the willingness to be uncomfortable, excavating that self. Because I'll be honest with you, Alex, I thought to myself, the feelings in that journey was that Jill was just something not worth loving.
Yeah.
That's what that feeling was for however long that was. And I was like, well, wait a minute, why? And I think that's the toughest thing to explain to people. I mean, number one, psychedelics scare them. Number two, what are you talking about where you can actually navigate the journey to answer questions? Like, it's a twofold thing. It's kind of a skill that you kind of learn. But I'm right there with you. Being curious through the really hard stuff, that's where you start to really make progress, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Tough and crazy as all these things do not work for everyone. The one thing that gets downplayed, in some cases overplayed, is just like psychedelics being dangerous, right? I personally think that Anything powerful is by necessity dangerous. Like if psychedelics weren't powerful, they wouldn't have the power to change you positively. And it is the fact that there is that risk, I think, that gives the experience a lot of weight, right? Like to yourself personally. It's like some of the most meaningful things that I've ever done in my life, and I guess it's true for other people, are the times when I actually stuck out my neck, right? And there's some part of me that when I have risked myself in those ways, there's some part of me that watches me actually risk. And because it watches me actually risk, right, it believes what I've experienced all the more. Right?
For the audience, what you mean risk, because I think I'm following, but for folks who might not have been using this for a therapeutic process, define that challenge of risk.
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is opening yourself up to the possibility of bad stuff being true or bad stuff happening.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, like we'll just take the homicidal like thought thing, right? You're in a trip, an urge comes up and it's a homicidal fantasy of like killing someone. That comes up, right? To the risk in this case could be opening yourself up to say, okay, what is this? And the risk in that moment is, well, holy crap, I could discover that I actually am like evil in some way, right? Or whatever, right? That is one version of risk. I'm opening myself up now to truly understanding, coming to a conclusion that I am evil in this moment. This is a moment of real potential change about how I feel about myself, right? That is fucking crazy terrifying. And when you are open to things, and when you actually are like malleable in that deep sense, there is a signature, at least to me, of that feeling of openness and the feeling of laying yourself bare before the possibility of both the worst and the best things being true about you, because it is emerged out of like being open arms to whatever reality presents yourself. And there is a big part of what changes you. There's a seed that gets planted there. I was open to this. I saw this. I think I might be able to believe this, right? I'm not denying anything. You've given yourself the opportunity to find something bad and therefore something good. And you've also cultivated courage, because courage is feeling everything and letting it happen anyway. You're just like, go ahead, give it to me.
It's funny for child abuse, for folks who have similar backgrounds to me, the risk is discovering that we aren't really worthy of love. And with the work that gets done, the complete opposite happens. You find out, no, absolutely, I am completely worthy of love. I was worthy of love. My parents were not capable for whatever reason of being good caretakers. It all gets flipped. But I remember in the very beginning, one of the forms of resistance was I was very sure that my doctors were going to drop me because they were going to eventually figure out how worthless I was.
Yeah.
And so the risk, and I hear it a lot, it's a pretty standard thing from folks who went through a very similar childhood of neglect with me, that we're really going to get validated that we're not worth anything. We're not worth loving. People are going to really find out I've had this great facade, and the work is facing that and turning that around and realizing that's not the truth at all. So it was interesting, the risk that you were talking about in terms of a different perception from a child abuse. I just got the shivers talking about it. Okay, well, so how are you finding people for the podcast? Are you reaching out? Do you have like a laundry list of people who are willing to talk? Like, how is that all coming together?
So my podcast is anonymous, so I'll say,
don't give anybody out.
Some people I have connection to in my life and, or meet in my life, actually. Most people now is really Reddit, cause that's, like I told you, that's the inspiration for, one of the inspirations for the stories was how unconventional a lot of the accounts that you'll find on, not a lot, but a good number of the accounts you'll find on Reddit are. And so what I do is I just look on Reddit And if I feel like something that, you'll find I find a ton of stuff there, and I just super honest, like, hey, my name's Alex. This is what we're up to. This is what we do. Check out our show. I think your story could be a great story. Let's talk. And that starts a whole conversation that goes on for a while. It's quite an investment for me personally, and it's quite an investment for the people that I work with to do any one of these episodes. Bunch of phases, honestly, of like introductory call. Then we do like another call where we do like a discovery. Then we do, if we move on to the final stage, then we can do 1 to 2 to 3 recordings, up to, I think the most I've ever recorded is like 7 or 8 hours, at least 7,
Wow.
almost 8 hours. And then there's just a ton of back and forth. It's supposed to be lived experience journalism, but I work with my guests as co-creators. A big part of the reason why I do that is because so much of what the content is about is their subjective experience. So much of the validation is, what they felt about a thing or what they saw about a thing is a thing that they only know, right? So I work with them a ton. And I also want to make sure that it honors their story. I really, really, really want to make sure that it honors that the title honors their story, that the theme of the episode does, that I'm not representing them because I'm taking hours and hours of interviews and on different days a lot of times, and I'm collapsing them into 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. I'm writing segues and doing all these things. I'm adding audio. I'm trying to make it a full experience. So I want them as co-creators. And the more engaged, I've noticed that, at least especially recently, the more engaged I am with the back and forth, like the awesomer it is. Like they're the storyteller. They're the best storyteller of their lives. And I'm just trying to help them as best I can, like facilitate that transmission. So that's how I find people. It's a little, I guess, maybe more about my process you maybe want to know, but that's what I do.
When you're chatting with folks from Reddit, it sounds like you took the time and you found some folks with credentials. Like when we say psychedelic therapy, one of the things I find interesting when I'm working with folks who have, gone through psychedelic therapy, and it was really somebody just being a sitter. They met once or twice, and then all of a sudden they had a journey where the person sat with eye mask and there was no conversation, things of that sort. Like, is there, when you're chatting with these folks, are you finding that the majority of folks had an actual therapist, or were they in sitter situations?
Psychedelic therapy in the broadest possible sense. And the big reason why is because that is the way it is applied, I believe, in real life. Like,
I think so too.
It is only the smallest subset of people that are going to a clinic. It's a little bigger, but still by far a subset of people that are working with an underground therapist. And then there's like people that are doing psychedelics therapeutically in all the other formats, right? So that's how we approach it, because I feel like that's how people approach it. And we want to capture that experience so that it helps those people.
I think it's important that as this starts to evolve, the public is made aware of what definitions are. I feel like there are practitioners out there that advertise themselves as psychedelic assisted psychotherapy or psychedelic therapy, and really, they're just really providing sitter services. All right. Alex, what's the question that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you?
What's one of the most amazing things I've ever heard a guest say?
Okay. What's one of the most amazing things you heard a guest say? Okay, cool.
I interviewed a woman who, one of the main things that she processed during therapy was her abortion. And this was particularly sticky for her. I believe that, I can speak for her, is that, she grew up very religious. And so, and came with the mindset and the feeling that it was murder. One of the most amazing things I've ever heard someone say, and really what gets to the core of what I hope to be able to do with people on Secret Wilderness, was her talking about an experience. It wasn't actually even a psychedelic experience. It was an experience that she had after she had an abortion. So she was at a family member's house, and she was in this liminal state. She did between waking and sleeping. And what she heard was this sound of what sounded to her like the cry of a baby. And the way she interpreted it was, this is my child. And it sounded to her really sad, but also sad for her, sad for the baby being sad for its own, like not being able to live. Some sense of it understanding why the mother made the decision that she did. She had never told that to anyone before she told that on her podcast. And what made that statement so amazing to me was that she said it straight. She said it straight. So what I mean by that is this is like one of the core things that are most like vulnerable to her in her entire life. And so when, at least in my experience, when you've got those things, you want to have a judgment about what those are and what those mean about you. Her having the judgment that her choice for to have an abortion was the right call, it's huge. But she did not give us that sense at all, at least me that sense at all when I heard her say that. She just said, I heard, what seemed like my child cry and it wished it could have lived. And it was sad for me. And that's it. And just let the ambiguity of that truth sit. She just told the experience as it was. And that to me was such an amazing moment. I felt the ground shifting underneath me. The space was sacred. And she was like, I'm going to tell you the truth of my life. And I don't know the answer. And that's how I feel. That is one of the most honorable and human things that someone can do. I get to hear people, I get to talk to people for a really, really long time that don't know me. And I just get to work with them on getting to the essential of their life. And what I have found when I have done that is like, as you dig, you don't like fall into an abyss, you run into gold. I'm not going to say that's what everyone is, but that's what I found. And it's like these little reminders of the small courage, the way people express courage, their subtle integrity. It's like, these are the kinds of things that I feel emotionally and I run into as I work with these people. It's the spiritual gift, I think, that I get to have through these conversations and makes it worthwhile easily, even if nothing else comes of it for me personally.
I was just thinking about the gift that you gave this woman to be able to share and share almost, I'm going to use the word share in ceremony to a certain extent, because you said it was a sacred experience. And so there's so much value in that. I'm just going to sit with that for a second. So thank you. Well, on the other hand, though, we may have kind of let the cat out of the bag, and then I'm going to have your contact information in the show notes. So folks who are listening and are interested in sharing their experiences, reach out to Alex, because it sounds like you really put a lot of time into creating a beautiful product at the end that encapsulates their experience.
I'm in love with it. I haven't felt this way since I was sitting down on my bedroom floor when I was like 4 years old or 5 years old playing with Legos. And the joy of learning and making things better because it's great, because it's intrinsically valuable. I personally want to get better. And that's so hard. It's so hard to get better every time you do something, especially something as annoying as editing can be, as files can be, as all this shit can be. When you fucking delete something, you erase something, or there's just a million things. Right? But even in like the annoying, I love the annoying things too, and not in some like romantic way. In that like it doesn't feel annoying. Like I think like no, it still does. But be honest with you, psychedelic therapy, like in the experiences that I had, in those experiences and out, really taught me like the value of just being in that experience. And then you all of a sudden do not move away from something annoying and you stick with it. And then the feeling that you get after a bit is a different feeling. And you're like, oh my God, I'm in a new space. And that is change. That's part of change. I love it. My personal goal artistically with this, I want to make the fucking most incredible cinematic experiences out of these journeys possible. Ooh. Like I want to make them fully come to life in an audio sense. And that's what I've started. I started with just the normal interview format. Then I moved to a narrative format. And now I'm like collapsing and working on the storytelling and making it tighter and tighter until the storytelling gets dialed. That's going to take a really long time. The storytelling is always foundational. Now I'm adding on audio, cinematic elements. So scoring the experiences, scoring key parts. I feel like psychedelic experiences are like a trope, especially in movies. It's either like kaderp, everyone's got mush, everything's wavy, get along. It's a cartoon world. I'm like, Look, of course it gets goofy, but also there are a fair number of experiences where you're at the throne of God and you're like, this is the most epic shit that could ever be. I have a deep passion for bringing that gravitas and that level of feeling and experience to these stories. So I want to make that in an audio format. And once that gets dialed, I mean, fucking dialed. Once I get that shit, then it's time for visuals. So we're going to start telling stories where magical realism is realism. There's no longer a metaphor, right? Those things, we can put these in everyday life because those experiences are actually accessible in everyday life. And so that I feel like is an opportunity as creatives and people that want to capture the experiences to be able to now try your hand at creating like that level of vibe that directors like Denis Villeneuve and all these incredible creatives have done so long in the mythic, in everyday stories of romance and normal dramas. Like now we're going to be able to take this psychological storytelling lens to those places, and that will be normal. Having psychedelics as part of my life shows you that melding, and it gives you such perspective. And I want to bring that to life as a storyteller. I want people to understand that those doors of perception being open, available to you if you so choose. And all the misadventures and ventures and highs and lows, danger, victory, failure. Like I want to paint that picture for people because they deserve it. I don't think psychedelics needs marketing. I think psychedelics just needs some honesty, some honest storytelling.
Alex, it has been a pleasure. I know we have kind of crisscrossed on LinkedIn a whole lot, and I enjoy your posts, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I look forward to continuing to follow the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jill. It was an honor.
So there you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Psychedelic Scene podcast. I think it's pretty clear that Alex is really focused on sharing stories and helping people understand kind of the challenges and the difficulties around this therapy compared to, we all know the marketing hype that's going to be out there in terms of, 10 years of therapy in 5 years. Yeah, it's a little bit harder than all of that. So with that said, if you enjoyed this content, head on over to psychedelicscene.com where we have a whole bunch of other content around psychedelic culture. And if you're liking that content, consider buying Jason, our founder, a little cup of coffee because he is the one who keeps all of the lights on. And so until next time, take care.